The United States and Taiwan strengthening their relationship with a new trade deal aimed at lowering tariffs and increasing strategic cooperation. Tariffs on Taiwanese exports now capped at 15%. Taiwan set to reduce or eliminate all tariffs on U.S. goods. Taipei also setting to purchase $85 billion worth of U.S. energy, aircraft, and machinery over a 4-year period. Now, this comes as U.S. officials are urging Taipei to drastically increase their defense spending, saying the threat from China, quote, has never been greater. But listen to this. New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had some very different thoughts about the state of Taiwan, or maybe not any thoughts at all. Watch her in Munich over the weekend and how she responded to a question about Taiwan's security.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
You know, I think that this is such a, you know, I think that this is a, this is of course a very long-standing policy of the United States, and I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point, and we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic, research, and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
Oh, to bring in Gatestone Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, we just said to ourselves on set, that was word salad coming from her, and that was a very uncomfortable moment. Your thoughts?
It wasn't even a word salad, Cheryl, because those weren't words. She obviously didn't know what to say. There's a very clear U.S. policy on this. There's been a lot of debate about it, and I don't know why she didn't understand that. We have a policy called strategic ambiguity, and that policy is that the United States tells neither Beijing nor Taipei what it would do in the case of an imminent military threat across the strait, for instance, China invading Taiwan. I actually think that we need to defend Taiwan for a number of reasons, especially U.S. credibility is at stake after the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. People are looking to see what we could do. We didn't hear any of this from the New York Congresswoman.
Well, maybe it's because she's not on the right committees in Congress. I don't know why she couldn't answer that question. But certainly I thought the interesting part of the deal, the trade deal, was that you need to see Taiwan up their security spending. We are very clear, I think, in this country that we know that the China threat is real, in particular off the coast of Greenland. I want to bring this up with you. This new Wall Street Journal report reveals how North Korean cyber operatives are infiltrating global companies, that includes U.S. companies, to generate up to $800 million annually for the Kim Jong-un regime. They steal identities. They use American collaborators and laptop farms to appear that they're U.S.-based, targeting high-paying remote IT jobs. Up to 90% of these workers' earnings are seized by the regime in North Korea, and that funds their nuclear program. That is the report. It is a blockbuster report in the Journal. What do you make of the idea, if you think about it, that someone in North Korea is posing as an American remote IT worker, but they're in fact in North Korea? What does that say to you?
It says that this has been going on for quite some time in various forms. So really what we know is that the United States has not taken effective action against this. The one thing that we can do is, you know, Cheryl, the North Korean hackers have been using China for decades and almost openly, and yet we don't say anything. That November 2014 attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment by North Korea, it was launched with Chinese IP addresses, and the United States has not been able to deal with China on this. So it's not just a North Korean question, it's a China question. And these scams have continued for a very long time. And for various reasons, you know, we have not adopted effective measures. And so it's not only the Chinese and the North Koreans, it's on us, Cheryl, to do something. It's on us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a cybersecurity issue for sure, Gordon. Before you go really quick, I do want to ask you about this. Obviously, we were seeing a big pushback with regards to U.S.-China relations as we're gearing up for that April meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping. Where are we at right now in that story?
There are a number of things. For instance, the United States has, especially the Commerce Department, has not imposed restrictions that are obviously needed on China. So, for instance, U.S. data farms can buy Chinese-linked equipment. And that allows China to not only steal data, but perhaps to remotely control those data farms. So the Trump administration needs to tighten down on that. Also, we saw on Friday that the Department of War actually mentioned that and formally listed Alibaba and other companies as being military linked. And then within minutes of that, as Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal have reported, the Pentagon actually took down that designation. And that means, I think, that they don't want to anger China. And in Chinese minds, they're going to view that as that they're being able to push the Trump administration around. Now, that may not be the reality, but that's the way the Chinese think it. And if that's the way the Chinese think, that's going to determine the way they're going to act. And that means they're going to be much more difficult to deal with. I think the Trump administration needs to take a very different posture in the run-up to the president's trip to China in the first week of April.
Yeah, with the backdrop of the trade relationship, human rights abuses, the story of Jimmy Lai, it's a very, very complicated run-up to that meeting. Gordon Chang, it's always great to see you. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Cheryl.
All right.